Today's episode contains conversations surrounding opioid use, mental health, and eating disorders. Listener discretion is advised. Hello, and welcome to this season of Alter Ego. We are starting season 1 with the topic of addiction in Butler County. Conversations on the physical side of addiction, trauma, the neuroscience, mental health, and stigma surrounding addiction. Experts, resources, and stories from people who have fought addiction head-on. I am your host, Laura Craigo. Let's keep the conversation going. Now a word from our sponsor, BetterHelp. For a long time, I suffered with depression and anxiety. I had tried therapy before, but struggled finding a therapist I connected with until I found BetterHelp. That's why I am so excited to share BetterHelp's mission to make therapy more affordable and more accessible, because finding a therapist can be hard, especially when you're limited to the options in your area. BetterHelp is a platform that makes finding a therapist easier because it's online. Remote therapy sessions, and by filling out a few questions, BetterHelp can match you to a professional therapist in as little as a few days. It's easy to sign up and get matched with a therapist. Click the link in description and receive 10% off your first month of BetterHelp. And by clicking that link, you support this channel. Plus, you can easily switch to a new therapist at no additional cost without stressing about insurance, who's in your network, or anything like that. I was struggling for a long time, and BetterHelp was where I found my therapist, Whitney, who I still see weekly for almost 2 years now. So, if you're struggling like I was, consider online therapy with BetterHelp. Click the link in description or go to betterhelp.com/alterego. That's betterhelp.com/alterego. There's no better time than now to start your mental health journey. Thank you again, BetterHelp, for supporting this channel. This episode is brought to you by R.W. McDonald & Sons Incorporated, Robert Stevens Jewelers. Thank you to our sponsors for your support on our first season of the Alter Ego podcast. Be sure to click the link in bio for your discount for BetterHelp Therapy online. 10% off your first month. Welcome to another episode of Alter Ego. I'm your host, Laura. I wanted to start off today's episode just sort of dedicating this episode in particular to a friend of mine who passed away just recently. He, like a lot of people, was struggling with mental health and alcoholism. And unfortunately, his body his heart couldn't take it anymore. I myself have been sort of sitting with the idea of cutting back on drinking. And a lot of times when someone says something like that, people immediately go to this place where it's like, oh, well, then you must be drinking too much. Well, then, yes, alcohol's not good for you. Yes, I know that. I'm aware of that. I have had healthy relationships with alcohol, and I have had unhealthy relationships with alcohol. But only I get to determine how that makes me feel or what my choice is moving forward. A big conversation that we talk about here is stigma. Everyone's journey is different. When are we going to come to a place where your way is not the highway? We're all on the highway. We're just in different lanes. We need to start understanding that there is so many different layers to recovery, abstinence-based recovery. Those people who maybe struggled with drugs but didn't struggle with alcohol. Yes, they are substances, but there are a lot of other addictions out there, and that's something that Betsy and I talk about today. She made a really great point of there are a lot of addictions that people suffer from. Gambling, working out, food. There are so many topics that we could dive into. So it's just something that we all need to come to a place with a little bit more compassion, I'm going to throw empathy in, although it might be in the same category as compassion, but acceptance, understanding. We're so quick to judge. We're so quick to point the finger. Someone said to me once, every time you point a finger, you have 3 pointed back at you. And it's true. Why do we do that? Do we do that in moments where we feel like we've got it together? And if I can get it together, then you should have to get it together. And that's just, unfortunately, it's not life for everybody. Life is not linear. It's not. You could be really thriving financially and emotionally, but your relationships or your jobs could be struggling. And then you could have a really great relationship and a really great job that you love, but then financially you could also just not be doing well. And emotionally, you could not be doing well. Everything ebbs and flows in life. And so I want to be very clear about a lot of the conversation that Betsy and I have today is just that the things that we learned growing up as dancers, what we noticed, and how we were able to sort of differentiate the things that were being said to us by adults that should have never been said to us, right? But we were able to know, like, that's not good advice, actually. But not everyone responds that same way. As women, we often are sort of judged by what our bodies look like. I went through a huge change at the end of my 30s into my 40s. I noticed a lot of change in my body, but at the time I was struggling mentally. And because of that, I was relying on having a glass of wine every day at 5:00. It was having a glass of wine. In fact, I remember an evening where my ex actually made a comment to me, and it was after 5:00. I was having a glass of wine and we were sitting there talking, and he said, "Oh, so wine before dinner." And I made the comment that, yes, I've actually been to your parents' house and had wine before dinner. Is that any different than us sitting here having a conversation? And I sat the glass down and I told him, do you have any reason why I have a glass of wine every day or two? And he said, no. And I proceeded to explain to him how I had been feeling in the relationship. And there was a look on his face of, really? And that was where it ended. There was no conversation. There was no, I'm sorry, that's not how I intended to make you feel, or there was nothing. It's not as if I was blaming him for everything, but there was a lot, and we needed to talk. And I was always the one to bring things up and say, I really think we need to talk about this. And there were so many moments of just silence, no response. Like, no response is a response. I think we're all aware of that at this point. And if you haven't experienced that, you will eventually. And I'm sorry for that. But a lot of times people don't respond because no matter what they say, it's not going to go anywhere. But then there are times where someone just continuously doesn't respond. When someone comes to you and says, I've been feeling a certain way because of this, take a step back and listen to it. I've had to do that. I've had to really look at myself and beat myself up over how I acted in situations, and the awareness that I know that I've stepped into is to a level of, okay, I need to make sure that I'm also not beating myself up too much, but immediately nip it in the butt, right? Bring it up, apologize, recognize, and move on. And that's the biggest part, is being able to move on, being able to say, have the conversation, and we need to be able to move on from this. Or if this isn't resolved, let's table it, and I'd like to come back to it. But communication is key. And when we are talking about mental health, there are so many resources in this county, but we also need to give people an opportunity to open up, to be able to talk. And trusting, it can be hard, especially when you're talking about mental health. Even if you don't have a substance abuse disorder, if you don't have alcoholism or drug use in your history, but you have mental health, it can be very scary to share that. So this is what Betsy does. It was a great time sitting down with Betsy, and I hope that you enjoy this episode as much as I did talking to her. We do discuss eating disorders. We do discuss mental health. So just always make sure that you are listening with your own discretion when it comes to these topics, if it is something that you are sensitive to. But thank you again for listening to the podcast, and let's get into our episode.
Laura, it looks like you're going to learn to be a DJ.
Super.
Wow.
I don't know why I'm making that noise. Betsy Laporte. You have such a fancy name. I always thought that in high school. I was like,
it's not really fancy though.
I was like, but it's so unique.
As my parents chose to name me Betsy instead of any other derivative.
Yeah, at least you weren't named Laura.
I could have been named Liz.
Just get a little close to it, like you're...
Like I'm Adele.
Like you're Adele. Yeah. Do that.
Okay.
Yes, pretend like you're Adele.
Okay, I will. I'm like channeling Lucretia.
Yes. Isn't that funny that that's who we think of too? Because she was, someone actually thought she was Adele when she was in Vegas last time.
I know.
We did talk about that.
She does look a little bit like her.
They actually got a photo with her. She told them. He's like, no. And they're like, but you are. And she's like, okay. All right.
I would use that to my advantage.
Yeah, me too.
I would be like, yes, I am Adele.
I am Adele. Could you imagine being Adele, though? Let's just talk about that for a second.
I watched like a documentary about her because I'm super into Amy Winehouse, also like that same style of music. And I guess she came from like the same music school that like
because they're both
came from.
Yeah, they're both English. So,
and she just has like her vibe of they compare her to like Dusty Springfield, like how she just stands and sings. Mm-hmm. Like there's not the performance art that like Taylor Swift and all these other people have, but that's what it was about, that they came from like the same school of music. Because I think when she came, like the first time she came to the United States and started singing, she was only like 17. She was very, very,
very young.
Young.
Well, because the first album was called 19, because each one was based off of her age. Because she had 19 and then she had 21.
Well, she looks like a completely different person, though.
Completely different.
And I know, I get it, but I almost like when women look real and healthy instead of everybody having the same body.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that she was like not a size 0 appealed to a lot of women.
She's still curvy.
I know, but she
did get
tiny.
She did get thinner, yeah.
And her face looks different. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you've ever watched her carpool karaoke.
I feel like I did watch that one with James Corden.
Yes. She's hilarious. Like
she really is funny.
Her laugh, like she seems fun also.
She did a bit for, it might have been for Ellen when she was on the Ellen show, where Ellen will be in your ear and you'll go somewhere in public and she'll ask you to
tell you what to say.
Yeah. So they went to a juice bar and she had her assistant with her. And they put a bunch of stuff in her purse. So whenever it came time to do this stuff, there was stuff in her purse. And she was she's like, ask about the wheatgrass shots. And she started asking about them. And then she said, ask if you can have some of the wheatgrass and just try it, just to eat it. She's like, there's scissors in your purse. Get the scissors out of your purse and just start cutting. So she started cutting the wheatgrass and chewing it. And then she's like, now ask your assistant to brush your hair. There's a brush in there. So she started brushing her hair as she was standing at this juice bar. And these people were all just like, what is going on? And then when she went to pay, she's like, tell them that if they'll take change, because that's all you have. And she's like, dump your purse out. There's a bunch of change in your purse. And she dumps her purse and all of this change just comes out on the, and then it finally was like, she finally at the end like said, you're on camera. So she has a really good personality. I love that kind of stuff.
I saw
I want to
one
do
where
that.
they made Ariana Grande go to Starbucks and order a grande. And her assistant carried her, and she's like, "I'm Ariana Grande. I'm so famous I can't walk." That's the way to do it.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
That's funny.
That is funny.
It's funny. Well, Betsy, it's funny. You know, we did actually talk about this a little bit. So Betsy and I danced together in high school. We were sequinettes. We were talking about the boots and the high knees. There was one, I think it was your senior year when we did that entrance. When we did the entrance where we came in running, it was like high. I remember we did a double pump, high knees.
Double
it was like
time.
doom, 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 bah, double time. Yes, dun,
That
dun,
was
dun,
every
dun,
game because I led from the
That's
one
right.
side.
They had the shorter girls leading, so all of us Amazon women were like trampling you. And poor Natalie Gershner, I hit her so many times in the back with my fists. Because we would like...
Stephanie Swift would be behind me, and she would just start screaming at the top of her lungs as soon as we started. They literally put the women with like 3 foot long legs in the very front.
She's like, and then you tall girls. And I was like, sorry, we didn't decide that.
No.
But yeah, there was a lot of craziness that ensued with the dance team and
dance in general.
I sort of just feel like this, like Pocahontas in the wind. I make this reference a lot, just waving goodbye to those memories.
I feel like there were positive memories overall.
There were positive, yeah. I mean,
because I feel like it gave me something to do during high school and I also appreciate, I guess, looking back that like it was all girls. It was something that like bonded you to other girls. And then now when you're in your 40s, you still kind of have that bond with those girls because you spent that amount of time with them.
Yeah.
And it was also girls I don't think I would have necessarily been friends with otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Because that wasn't really my vibe.
We had a good mix, I think, too.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. From like girls that were into other things.
Yeah.
So it was like an eclectic band of girls that like dance held us together. So.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing I appreciate about dance, because I've told my parents this in recent years, like all the money, I'm sure it wasn't cheap to send me to dance like that as a little kid, and the expense that dance is, but that really gave me, I have like 2 coping skills from childhood, dance and reading. And those were both like gifted to me by my parents when I was little. And they're still like my top 2 coping skills. Like I still go dance somewhere once a week. I still read for 10, 15 minutes before I go to bed every night. Like, so they were, I've told my parents, like, I appreciate that you gave me coping skills, that it didn't matter if I had $1 million in my checking account or $0. Like both of the coping skills you like reinforced and instilled in me are coping skills that are free.
Yes. And I don't know, because I'm not a parent. You are a parent, so we can touch on this. I'm sure this is something that you are passing down to your children.
Yes.
Right? The reading is such a huge skill to pass down a habit. It's a habit. It can become a habit.
Yes.
To pass down to your children and how important that is. So,
yes.
I mean.
Well, I think in like, especially with kids these days in the age of TikTok and YouTube and how kids are given iPads at school to learn, reading uses a different part of their brain. And reading is a solitary activity, and it's not them watching a video and being entertained by somebody. It's a way for them to like quiet their head, and it's something that lasts more than 15 seconds because it's not supporting that short attention span entertainment that is ruining kids.
Yeah. It really is. I'm really grateful that we didn't grow up in the era of, well, we didn't even have cell phones. So
Right.
I think in college, the first phone I had was one of those like $20 a month that you turned it, when you turned it on, it started roaming.
Yes.
But I had it just for driving home from school in my beat up Chevy Cavalier, in case it broke down on the freeway, which, yeah, there were a couple times where I had needed that phone. And that's the only reason I had it. But we didn't have that stuff, right? We weren't.
Well, I mean, our parents just didn't have the access to us that parents have to children now.
Yeah.
And like, I don't track my 18-year-old daughter. And people sometimes are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you don't do Life 360. Well, nobody tracked me. You know what I mean? Like, kids need some independence. And I sometimes think technology makes helicopter parenting worse. So you're then raising these kids that are graduating from high school and they can't do a load of laundry. They can't go to a store and buy something. They can't. It's just the enabling.
Yeah, they need to
with
be
technology.
Self-sufficient as well.
Yes.
And also like a sense of independence. So I had friends growing up who, one of my girlfriends, she couldn't, when we were young, she couldn't sleep over at my house. And you could see her house from my front porch.
Right.
I was like, we can see your house. And I'm like, I can't wait to get out of here and go somewhere and like do something, because I was allowed that freedom, right? To get on my bike and go out. Of course, my mom wanted to know where I was going, but I would go to the corner store and I'd come right back. Like, that's what I did. But I think that she was so scared of staying anywhere else. She would, in the middle of the night, would wake up my dad and he'd have to take her home. And I was always so bummed out by that. I was like, what?
I feel like our generation of kids grew up like you came home and let yourself into the house after school by the time you were in like third grade.
Yeah.
Almost every kid we grew up with was a latchkey kid. And that's the polar opposite of what like societal norms teach mothers now. Mm-hmm. And it's not necessarily a better thing. I mean, or there's more dangers now, but it's just more pressure on women for this unachievable goal that like working mothers, like all these hats you have to wear and all these standards that if you don't reach them, like you feel like you are failing as a parent, as a woman, as a mother, as a daughter, as a friend. I think sometimes
it's got to be exhausting.
Well, I think sometimes all of that leads into mental health. When I see people that are in their 50s, early 60s, it's often an issue with them to even talk to them about what do you need, because they grew up in an era where you could only be a mother, a nurse, a teacher. Like there were not opportunities for women. So, and no one talked about mental health in the 60s, 70s, 80s.
Even when we were growing up, it wasn't a thing.
But then when you have these women that, they're grandmothers now, they're retired, it's the first time in their life that they've actually had time to think about what they need and what they want. They have this immense guilt, even telling me, this is what I need. You know what I mean? I need to work on self-esteem. I need to work on social skills. I need to work on coping skills. Well, they feel bad even telling me about their needs because it's always your husband first, your family first, your kids first. And trying to explain to women that you can't pour from an empty cup, and that is what you have been doing since you became a mother in your 20s, and you are now 50 and a grandmother and your children are not at home. Like, this is the time to focus on you without feeling that guilt so that you can be happy and healthy and whole. And when like some women embark upon this journey, they really start to change because they've never thought about themselves. It was their husband's needs or their wants or their families. This is what we do first. So it's like a really beautiful thing to see older, women for the first time in their life get to focus on themselves. And then when that change occurs, it's the best thing for their granddaughters to see. It's the best thing for their daughters to see.
Yes.
It's the best thing for their families to see them for the first time in their life have something for themselves that has nothing to do with them being mothers, which has nothing to do with them being wives, which has nothing to do with any of the other million hats that they try to wear in a day. And I think it's hard for them to like even accept that I am putting this energy into myself. Like I should be doing something for my grandkids. I should be doing something. I should be cleaning. My baseboards need swept. Like my carpets need shampooed.
But the thing is that's a huge part of what you do, right? You deal with a lot of mental health. So let's go right to that. I mean, I want to talk about what you do, but you've been sober since 2010.
Yes, I have.
Do you want to talk about that in detail? I know everybody's sober journey is different. Everyone I talk to is different. I think part of what I like to express is that there's a lot of stigma behind when we talk about substance, but then everyone's story is their story.
I really feel like I was caught in like the pharmaceutical epidemic of the late 90s. There was no social media. You have to think like in 1997 and 1998, like the late 90s, early 2000s, there was still that stigma about drugs and addiction and recovery. And I know as a teenager and in my early 20s, there was very little information that I even knew. I knew about alcoholism and AA, but there just was not the education that and information. Like we didn't get taught in school about the dangers of drugs and addiction.
Yeah, it was just say no to drugs. That's all that we were being told was say no to drugs.
We didn't really learn anything else.
Yeah, that was it. You're like, okay.
So, I struggled. I struggled with that. Thank God was able to, get recovery and get sober. And I did that all in Butler with resources through that journey and through the different types of supports that I found in Butler. That led me to my job. But I guess I never really, in the same sense, thought about my mental health and how my mental health led to really poor choices as a teenager and a 20-year-old. So once I started to, get clean time and really, have to deal with me. I realized that I didn't have really good coping skills, and I, had anxiety, and I think, the drug abuse elevated that anxiety to a point where I, was having panic attacks, and I'd never had panic attacks. And in my very early years of sobriety, I had a baby. So, all of the stress of being a first-time mother, I'm sure that contributed to the anxiety. I'm sure all the, changes that your body chemically goes through with pregnancy contributed to some depression. When I first went for mental health services, I was postpartum also, and I'm sure the way that presented at the time, added to that kind of diagnosis of depression and anxiety. But I had a really amazing case manager, and after I think I'd been sober for about 5 years, she talked to me about the Certified Peer Specialist program and explained, what that was, and that she felt that I would do a really great job at that. And the Butler County pays for the training, so you don't.
Oh, cool.
You don't have to have like the money to get certified for this. And my oldest daughter was back, in school, so I was trying to fill the day and do something productive and kind of give back for the recovery and the, resources that I was given that helped me to do this. So I went to the training and got certified and got hired, right out of the training, which is also great. I think that helps the way that they, run the program in Butler. Different places that offer certified peer specialist services show up on the last day of training, and you like open interview right there.
Oh, cool.
So there's really no like gap in your training to work, which I think is a great thing, because I think, most people that go into this field, they prefer that you have a mental health diagnosis yourself, because you really can't share your experience with someone else unless you have gone through it.
I mean, that is CPS, right? It is lived experience.
So what a certified peer specialist is it's somebody, it's kind of a little bit like case management, and it's also kind of a little bit very therapeutic. We are allowed to share our lived experiences with our peers. So that bridges a gap in recovery that no other service can provide. Therapists are not supposed to share their own personal lived experience with you. Case managers are not. So we, aside from you having a sponsor or like attending meetings, and not all people that have mental health have substance abuse. So they, in any other way, would not be able to have like a relatable mental health experience with somebody. So when you're able to, share, this is where I went for therapy. This is, what I did. These are the services I had. It really gives them hope. And without hope, your foundation for recovery and your path toward recovery can be so much harder. Yeah. So, really being able to relate and explain to them, I've had panic attacks too. This is what I used to do. It kind of builds a different level of trust and open communication with a peer that they perhaps like would not have in any other aspect of their life. So also, like, once you talk to somebody and you're like, oh, well, you've lived through the same thing I've lived, you're more willing to open up and share your personal story with them, because you feel safe, like it's a no judgment zone.
Yeah, you can have someone say, oh, no judgment, but it's not always guaranteed if someone hasn't walked a mile in your shoes. It can be hard, right, to talk about something that's weighing heavy on you and causing anxiety. I understand that. I mean, I had a panic attack. I still remember having this panic attack in New York and feeling like I was crazy, right? Yeah. I literally felt like I was crazy, and going to the hospital, and the male doctor, and this is not bashing male doctors. This is not bashing men. This doctor in particular happened to be a man, and the way that he approached the situation was asking me, well, what time of the month is it? He asked me that question, and I was like sitting there, and I started to feel ashamed and embarrassed. And I was like, well, what? That doesn't have any. He's like, well, hormones can play a lot in this, and I think that this is probably just a hormonal thing. And did you go through a breakup recently? And I was like, no, I didn't go through a breakup. What does that have to do with this? Like, everything got super bright. The lights got super bright. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I felt like I was going to pass out, and everything felt overwhelming, and people were talking to me, and I couldn't hear anything anyone was saying. And I literally felt like I was going to run out the front door. Like I was at work, I felt like totally suffocated in a way. And he basically, it just came down to where he's like, well, I think you just, I think maybe there's probably something going on, but I don't think it's anything serious.
Well, I
And
thought
it's
I
probably
was
just
having a heart
hormonal.
attack the
Yes.
first time that happened to me.
Yes.
I literally,
Yeah.
there's like a history in my family with heart issues.
Same.
So I'm wary because of that information. And I was driving in my car with a newborn baby in her infant car seat and thought I pulled over on the side of the road and I called my mom and was like, you have to come get me. I have the baby in the car. I'm having a heart attack.
Yeah.
And that's what I thought, was happening because it never occurred to me that it was anxiety.
Yeah.
And the way that you were treated is unfortunately just, that stigma of mental health where, and if you really think about the course of mental health, it is insane how it has progressed and how we're sitting here today just talking freely about mental health. I've been at my job now for 9 years, and I would say
Sorry.
and it's in the 9 years that I've been working doing this, it's insane the amount of growth and change that has happened with that stigma. And the amount of just resources and supports that people can now have when they need it. I feel like Butler County we are like really super heavily loaded with mental health supports and with different resources that people can utilize. And I mean, there's people that come from other counties to Butler to get help
you
with
had mentioned
mental
that.
health.
Yeah, you had mentioned that. So when you went through, do you want to talk about, or I'd like to know where you went when you were going through your recovery, like where you went through there, and was Grapevine the first job you had out of the CPS training?
Yes.
Okay.
And I have been there ever since.
Those are two separate things, but yeah.
I went through family psych and actually no. First I went to Irene Stacy. I went to Glade Run. I went to family psych. So I kind of utilized all the resources that were in Butler. It really took until I got to family psych to find the therapist that was for me. And I definitely, share that part when I'm speaking to peers, because you really do have to find that person that is your person and someone that, listens and processes, what you're saying in kind of the same way that you do. Prior to being at family psych, I feel like medication was very much pushed upon me. And because I have, a background in addiction, that was something I was very against. And I kind of had to go through the over-medication stage of mental health before I realized this is not the way I want to do this. And I actually struggled to find somewhere to go for therapy where they would see me without giving me meds.
Oh, wow.
And well, I mean, that goes hand in hand. I do understand. I just think sometimes, actually all the time, if you have a client and they are telling you, I had this issue with drugs, with alcohol, I have this addiction issue, trying to give them skills that are not like, oh, when you feel like this, just take this pill. That's not promoting change. That's just filling a hole that they used to fill with drugs and alcohol with meds.
But also there's a lot of misdiagnoses with mental health because people aren't off of substances for long enough, like a lot of rehab, right? So you want to make sure someone's completely detoxed so you can actually really be
sometimes I think it's how you present, and a lot of people's depression and anxiety is very situational. Like, for example, if you just recently lost a parent and you start feeling very depressed and anxious and upset, you go to therapy and you tell them, I'm depressed, I'm not it's really hard for me to get out of bed. It's really hard for me to do like basic everyday care. They're going to say, well, you have, however they diagnosed you. So I sometimes tell people, like, after years and years, maybe you need to go back and have another diagnosis. Like, you went for a diagnosis after a very like traumatic thing occurred to you. That's situational.
That's a normal reaction to something like that.
Like not letting that mental health diagnosis define you, because you're more than a DMV code. You're more than, whatever, bipolar. You're more than bipolar schizophrenic. You're more than manic depressive. You're more than that. And I think like we can recover. We can change. We can be different. It's not like, once you have diabetes, you have diabetes forever. This is like a different type of diagnosis. Yeah. So everybody
it is very easy to feel defined by something like that. It's very easy. Yes.
And then once you're defined by that, sometimes the way the system is set up, that they keep pushing that diagnosis on you. So it's very hard to see outside of that you're more, or you're worth more, or there's a way out of this. And I think sometimes people just get bogged down by that.
Yeah.
And then when you don't have anyone that you can talk to that shares their experience, like that same diagnosis, you know what I mean? And I don't live like that anymore. I just always am trying to tell people, like, it's just one day at a time. Like, it's so easy to get overwhelmed and bogged down and just like all this heavy stuff on top of you. And people just, it's hard for them to find time for themselves. It's hard for them to find time for their self-care.
Yeah. I mean, and a lot of what you also deal with at Grapevine is homeless.
Yes.
And so I want to get into that, and especially something that you do every year. Betsy fills a closet each year for homeless women specifically, because if you're a woman out there, you know what certain, how do we say this?
Hygiene.
Certain hygiene that women need. It's not something that we can just choose whether or not we have it, that we need. Imagine with inflation the way that it is right now on everything, just going and buying a box of something at the drugstore now, how expensive that is for someone that's homeless. Sanitary
products now are, I would say, low end $8, high end $15 per box of sanitary products. If you are a homeless woman, how is that feasible for you? When
you're literally trying to figure out how you're going to get food.
Yes.
And you don't have a place to live. So
Correct.
The priority is, when we're talking about basic essentials, like food and water are going to be above that.
Yes.
So
it's just about, the reason why I do that is it's just about being able to give people, basic hygiene products and let them have their dignity. And
yes,
in the face of like, what is going on with you if you're homeless, how that affects your mental health, how that affects your physical health. Your dignity shouldn't be, something that you have to sacrifice every month because you have to go in somewhere and ask for sanitary products.
Yeah. And the great thing too about Grapevine is there are showers there.
Yeah.
You have food there. So you're open, I believe it's 7 days a week, but there are certain holidays, right? Where you,
yes.
Okay.
So we have in the front of our building is a center, and there are activities, there are supports, there's food, there's water, it's air conditioned, it's heated. It gives people a purpose because it gives them a place to go. And, none of that it's nonprofit. None of that is, directly tied to any type of other recovery resources that they have. It also gives them a place to socialize. It gives them something to do except sit in their house and watch TV and be in their own heads. And the beautiful thing about it is, you know, when people are down there, it doesn't matter what their diagnosis is. They're just down there being friends and being themselves and being something outside of, you know, a DMV code. And they really do support each other. It gives them the social skills that maybe they wouldn't have had before. It gives them, you know, other peers to lean on and share their story with. And it's, for some people, the first time they get to experience like that rewarding feeling of helping somebody else and relating to somebody else. That's not like in a group setting through another, you know, recovery source. So, and the really beautiful thing about it is when people come down there, they start volunteering and helping. So like the beauty of human nature that like you start to get better and give back. I mean, if you just apply that to any field ever, like think of what a better place the world would be.
It would. I was just talking to Tammy this morning about Boyce. Richard introduced me to Boyce, and he was homeless for, I think, a little over a year, maybe a year and a half. He was living out of his truck. And he's helped with a lot of the, you know, renovations that you're doing there. So he said he did some painting, some of the different tables and chairs in that conference room that I sat in and talked to him in. And he does that as a volunteer. And it's interesting because we do very much live in a world where a lot of people will, you know, offer their service or their time and then be like, but this is my rate. This is how much is. And not to say that I'm not saying that someone doesn't have value, right? That's not what I'm saying.
They're just giving to give.
Like I'm going to, because I want to help. And if this eventually turns into cool, if it doesn't, okay. But I'm it's just interesting that that's where we are. And it's where do we find the balance between like, it is your time and your expertise, but it's also like there are a lot of people out there that don't have the money to buy basic essentials.
Well, it's also just
and like
people,
you said, if we're here, what are we doing if we're not here to?
It's also just people like, you know, he had all these skills with construction. So now because you have some peer-to-peer support, because you're having like healthy, good social interactions, because no one is judging you because of a mental health diagnosis. Now I painted, I remodeled, you know what I mean? And I think sometimes someone just appreciating those skills that you have is a self-esteem builder that you might not have had for years. The other thing the center provides, like if we didn't have the center, some of the people that are there daily, they would say a word to anybody else in 24 hours.
Yeah.
You know, that's
the saddest part to me.
Bored in Butler County? Need to know where to catch a show this weekend? What events are even happening in the area? I'm Molly Miller, one of the writers behind the Butler Eagles Weekend Entertainment section, and I'm here to banish the boredom from your cold and rainy days. Sign up and receive Miller Minutes, that's my column, and a list of Butler County-based events direct to your inbox every Thursday afternoon by visiting bit.ly/ButlerEagleWE newsletter. That's bit.ly/ButlerEagleWE newsletter. You can also find the latest events under the A&E tab at www.butlereagle.com. Click Weekend Entertainment, or pick up Thursday's print edition of the paper for the latest events. See, there's lots to do in Butler County when you read the Butler Eagles Weekend Entertainment section. Visit bit.ly/ButlerEagleWE newsletter to sign up for the weekly newsletter, so you won't be bored in Butler County again.
Talk to me a little bit about value of peer-to-peer support.
Well, I mean, the value of peer-to-peer support, like I said, it's the only bridge in recovery, you know, where you're able to share your personal experience, and the hope and the trust that builds upon kind of sometimes makes you the preferred service for that person.
Yeah.
Like I would rather go do that with you than, with this or that. And I kind of think when you have that basis of trust, it really makes the recovery process easier, because you start to realize that talking about it is how you get better, and how you implement change. And change is really scary for a lot of people. So when you're able to, know I have someone I can call or text anytime, and they're going to understand this, and they're going to share their story with me. And it's very rewarding to, see people and help facilitate their, journey of change and recovery.
Well, it's probably really rewarding for you too, because you've been on both sides of it, right?
Yes.
You've experienced it. And like you said, and this is a point that I've made a lot too, and I've talked about this in my own mental health journey. And it's funny how, just really quickly thinking about social media and the social media that we live in today, and how that's a huge problem with mental health, because I saw an ad this morning, actually, that made me cry. At like 5:30 in the morning, I was crying watching this ad, and I believe it might have been for Dove. This is not an ad, by the way, but it was mothers who have daughters who have eating disorders because of what they're seeing on social media.
Yeah.
And not too long ago, I posted something, and we talked about this, and this is why I kind of wanted to get into this too. We talked about body image issues and how we both grew up as dancers, and unfortunately, that is something that happens in that world.
Yep.
I was fortunate where I was always built like Gumby, right? Those were my genetics.
Yeah.
But we're all predisposed to genetics.
Right.
There are certain things that we just cannot change. So telling a little girl or a little boy that they shouldn't eat, that they should eat less, or that they should, is not doing them a service, right?
No.
We know a lot of people who have struggled with eating disorders, and it's hard when you have never, I personally didn't experience it, and I didn't ever have body image issues till I was probably in my late 30s because of a relationship. I had started drinking a little bit more than I probably should have been, but I was in fitness. So then it was this weird, like, well, why am I gaining weight?
Right.
I'm working out all the time, but I wasn't taking care of myself, really, truly. I'd stopped kind of cross-training, whatever. Not to get off on a tangent here, but I saw this ad, and that's kind of what it was, and it was that song, You Are So Beautiful to Me. And it shows this young girl, like from a little tiny girl all the way up to a teenager, and then she ends up hospitalized for an eating disorder. And then it had different sets of mothers with their daughters singing You Are So Beautiful to Me, and like just different like clips of them. And it said like content warning, in the caption of the video. And I will see these things all the time where it's like, in 3 weeks, you can have dancer's legs and a dancer's waist. And I'm like, can we please stop doing that? Can we please stop doing that? However you want to lose weight, if you want to take a pill, if you want to do injections, if you want, and you want to take, and people do that and it takes months, right?
Yeah.
That's totally your choice. That's not the judgment. I want everybody to feel confident in their skin. And there are some people who need sort of that catalyst, right? To get started on their weight loss journey. However, these ads that are being put out all the time where it's like, oh, if you drink this tea, you're going to be skinny like me. If you do this,
the thing about that is they pick these famous people that are trying to say, like, I maintain this body image with this weight loss drug or this pill.
But they probably have like professional trainers and like
they have professional trainers, they have professional chefs. They've
had
liposuction. They've had their fillers. They've had all this surgery.
Sculpting, whatever.
Yes.
Like they have all these things. I'm sorry. It's like,
that is not why they look like that. They look like that because they have all day to work out if they want.
And they have the money. Yeah.
And they have chefs.
Yes.
And they have personal trainers. And they have plastic surgery.
Mm-hmm.
It's giving, it's kind of selling a false package.
Yes. Now, I do believe that everyone could be like super fit, But Julie Hooks was on the podcast, and that's like a dedicated thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't drink. She has a very strict workout regime that she sticks to, right? And there are people who do that, and they do macros, and it doesn't mean they don't go. And this is not someone who's, this is maybe they have a glass of wine on a Saturday. I'm talking about someone like me who's never been through like a recovery. I could never be a certified peer specialist. Have I had times in my life where I'm like, I probably need to stop drinking for a while because I'm coming home and drinking every single night? Yes. Have I recognized that? Was I able to just do it? Yes.
Well, not all.
It's
not everybody
different.
that does this comes from like a drug and alcohol background. I just personally do, and that has. I mean, all of our services are mental health related first.
Okay.
It's
I definitely have a background with mental health, so
it's just very, very common that mental health and drug and alcohol go hand in hand.
Yeah.
I think having that sometimes is because I have some peers that I don't talk to them about drugs and alcohol because that's not relevant to their life.
Yes.
But I know, like in my journey, the drugs and alcohol were directly related to mental health.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be even be drugs and alcohol. You can be addicted to food. You can be addicted to shopping.
Yep.
You can be addicted to, gambling. You can be addicted to exercise. You can be addicted to diet.
Yeah.
It's,
I'm
people.
glad you said that because
You find a way to fill the hole inside you. And until you do the personal work and the accountability to actually see what that hole is and to fill it with something, positive, and really get to the root of, where those issues stemmed from. And that goes back to what I was saying, like you really have to find a therapist and find the supports to support your recovery journey.
Yeah.
I'm very anti-medication for myself. I have not been on psych meds in 15 years.
Yeah.
That's just the way I do it. And I think sometimes people don't realize that this can be a very personalized journey because everybody is very, very different. Some people respond well to therapy. Some people do not. Some people respond well to support groups like AA and NA and women's groups and different groups they have for mental health. Some people do not respond well to that. Some people do better with a case manager and a CPS coming into their home once a week. Some people don't like, having services in their home. They do better out in the community. It's just, showing people that there's many different paths to get where you're going.
Yes.
And no path is wrong as long as that works for you.
I agree with you. And the only other thing I wanted to ask you before we start to wrap it up and make sure that you get to say everything that you want to say, but abstinence-based recovery, right?
Yes.
There are people who do rely on, especially people coming off of opioids that maybe rely on cannabis, right?
Right.
There are people who I know, a lot of people who have had, issues with drugs, specifically with opioids and, whether it's fentanyl or whatever it is, but never had a drinking problem.
Yep.
But maybe,
I never had a drinking problem.
But maybe
really.
do enjoy a glass of wine every once in a while.
It's everyone's wired different.
This is where we talk about stigma, right? How is it that we are saying to someone, well, this path is okay, but this path is not okay?
I think that comes a lot from like old school recovery standards. You have to think, when they wrote like the big book and there was no Suboxone. There might have been methadone, but there was no Suboxone. There was not, the medical field had not advanced for drug and alcohol recovery, medically assisted therapeutic resources. So that was not a thing. The way I look at it, I would rather see somebody taking Suboxone and living than dying. So
100%. Yeah.
I just think, you know, sometimes that school of thought hasn't caught up with the technology and scientific advancement that there is now. I mean, there was half of the, you know, psych meds that they now are pretty common. Those weren't around in the 80s. Those weren't around in the early 90s.
Yeah.
So I think some of that was just the advancement of medicine.
Yeah, 100%. It's like what you said too with mental health, and even Dr. Brophy and Joe Mahoney said this. They said the advancements that we have had in the last like 20 years.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Or crazy, he said. And think about like even in the future, they're probably going to look back at our ways now and be like, wow, I can't believe they were doing that. Wow, I can't believe they were doing that. He said, but we have come a very long way. And he said, and if it wasn't for methadone, he's like, my brother would be dead if it wasn't for methadone. Yeah. So to me, it's those go hand in hand, right? When it comes to someone,
too, people don't realize that is something that, you know, addiction and the genes for addiction, that is genetic also.
Yep.
It's you wouldn't judge someone if they told you they had cancer and they were taking medications for cancer so that they could extend their life and be well and have, you know, a life that was livable and they could be happy. So I think you have to think geographically where we live too. We were, you know, targeted by a pharma company. There's a million shows on Netflix and Hulu about, you know, Oxycontins and how, you know, Eastern Ohio, Western Pennsylvania, West Virginia, all through the Steel Belt, Coal Belt. Like we were literally
targeted
guinea pigs for
because they knew
billionaires to make money. So they really, you know, dropped addiction into this town. And you know, that's part of the reason why this area of the country is so great for recovery, because all of that, you know, money that the pharmaceutical companies have had to give back, you know, since losing in court because they were prescribing pharmaceutical heroin to people.
And saying it wasn't addicted.
Has provided,
it's not addictive.
But it's provided billions of dollars for recovery in this area. And, you know, that attitude continues. So it's breaking that, you know, stigma of that also. It's just it's really just about like being the change and you know, being non-judgmental and moving with love and good intentions instead of, you know, everything's me.
Or it has to be exactly this way. Life doesn't work that way.
Well, that's, I kind of always think
doesn't.
That's the beauty part of, you know, what my path with addiction taught me. I am very, very non-judgmental and I am very comfortable, you know, with anyone from all walks of life. I'm super chatty. I will sit and talk to you for 45 minutes about your shoes if that's what we need to do.
Yeah, I was actually going to say, I like your sneakers.
Oh, thank you. But it's about, you know, treating people like people instead of like a label. And all of the things in this world label. If you actually think about what Instagram is, because I've had this discussion with my teenager daughter, Instagram is a label. When you post a picture on Instagram, what are you posting under it? Hashtag this, hashtag that, hashtag this, hashtag that. You are putting 20 different labels on a picture of yourself. And I just want, you know, kids, young women especially, to grow up not being a label.
Yep.
I'm super against the hashtags. Like, do not, you're so much more than that. And like the possibilities are endless of what you can be. Like, please do not be a hashtag.
No.
Be everything else in life
that's
but
like,
a hashtag.
That's like this episode is titled, Don't Be a Hashtag.
Yeah, don't, ever.
Don't. Well, Betsy, I'm so glad that we ran into each other
Me
and that we're like
too.
sitting here talking, and I'm going to get in with some more people over at Grapevine.
Good.
Is there anything else that you would like to share before we...
I guess just, be aware that, this change and recovery is possible. It's possible in Butler, Pennsylvania. You don't have to go to some, resort in Florida or California to get this. I'm here doing this, and I did
Especially with those natural disasters. Sorry.
Thanks. Stay here.
Sorry, I just had to throw that in there.
But I mean, like my recovery being local is also like what I really, really preach. Like you can do this here. You can do this in your hometown. You can do this and stay near your family and have family supports. You just have to want to be different. One of my favorite mom phrases right now is choose the life you want and say no to everything else.
Mm-hmm.
So
I love that.
if that doesn't align with what you want or, what your goal is, say no. Say no, walk away, find something to say yes to.
Girl, I got to give it to you again. Hey, she's getting claps again. That's so important because I think too many people it's like a regret in life. When people come to the end of their life, one of their top regrets is that they worried so much about what other people thought of them and what their choices were that they weren't true to themselves.
Yeah.
And that's a huge part of that, right? And being able to move forward. The only way you're going to be able to move past your past is to
just think about like the love and intention that you can give in all aspects of your life if you are yourself.
Yes.
So like you're giving 100% of this fake facade and this Instagram face and, promoting that your life is this like perfect, matching outfit in a field of pumpkins life. And that's just not realistic.
No.
Life is messy, but there's so much beauty in that mess.
I love that. You're a baddie. I can say that. That's what I can say. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You're awesome.
You're welcome.
Thank you for tuning in to Alter Eagle. Join me every Monday for a new episode, and be sure to click subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Follow us on Instagram at Alter Eagle Podcast. Until next time, stay safe, stay hopeful, stay kind.